This is the radio in the 3rd Gen 4Runner. There's no touchscreen, there's no GPS, there's no hands-free anything, just old school buttons and knobs. And that's kind of how I like it. Because these days, all my communication, all my music, all my navigation happens on one of these. But today in the garage, we're going to be adding the functions from this guy into our OEM radio.
So here we are inside the vehicle. We're going to go ahead and remove all the trim pieces surrounding the shifter, the radio, climate control, and the AC vents. And I've got a small pry bar here, but really you can just do this with your hands. These cars are getting older, so you're going to want to be careful, particularly if you have any of these set bezels that have the wood grain attached to them. They tend to get very brittle. For the shifter surround, there are 4 clips total, 2 at the back, 2 at the front. If you pop the 2 at the back out and then just pull straight back and up, the 2 at the front will come out as well. On mine, I have this cord running the switch panel that will force us from removing it all together. But in order to get the room I need, what I'm going to have to do is move the shifter further back into a neutral or one of the drive positions. So I'm going to put my key in the ignition. And by turning the key to the accessory position, it's going to release the shift lock so we can move that shifter back. And now I can rotate my bezel 90 degrees and set it out of the way. Now once more with the pry tool, I'm going to start at the lower bezel on one side and just pull slightly away, working my way around with the pry tool until I run into a clip, and then a little outward pressure should pop those clips free. I have one that's a little stubborn here that actually turned out to be an aftermarket clip that somebody had put in that was a little too big, but a little firm pressure on it and I was able to, just with my hands, get that to pop out. Now I failed to do it earlier, but certainly learn from my mistake and remove the ashtray before you start, or while the shifter is in a rearward position. Now starting at the top of the bezel, there's going to be 4 plugs to remove. One here for the hazard light switch, there will be another for the clock. A white and an orange plug will also be there, and that will run the ECT control and the window switch for the rear hatch. Now we can use the ignition again to move the shifter rearward, or if you're unable to do that for some reason, there's another thing you can do. On the right side of the shifter, there's a little switch that's covered up by a plastic tab. By depressing that switch, it'll release the shift lock lever, and you can move the shifter without using the ignition. Now with the shifter out of the way, I have the room I need to remove the ashtray. Now with the benefit of hindsight, I think it might have been easier to start unplugging the plugs at the top, but really you can attack this in any order and you should be able to get to all of them. On my bezel on the far left side, we have a cigarette lighter, and that's going to be 1 pair of connectors, 1 for a light and 1 for the power. Next to that, there will be a light for the ashtray, and that just pops off. It doesn't have to twist. And on this bezel, there are 2 additional power outlets at the bottom, and they do not have lights. They are just the 12 volts. And from here we can get a pretty good look at the back. I've already unplugged the connector for the hazard light switch, and there is ECT controls and the window switch for the back. The one remaining plug is for the clock. And with that out, our bezel is free. Now again, these are, at this point, many decades old and fairly fragile, so make sure you put this in a place where it will be safe until we're ready to reinstall. Now, with both bezels out of the way, most of the guts of the center console are exposed, so we can do some work here. We're going to grab these wires and just get them out of the way so they're not bothering us as we're taking the radio out. The radio itself is held in with 4 8mm JIS bolts. Because it's an interior fastener, you can probably get away with a Phillips screwdriver, but if you're unaware, every product made in Japan uses JIS, or the Japanese Industrial Standard, rather than Phillips screws. They look very similar, but there are a couple of key differences. First, JIS screwdrivers have a sharper tip than Phillips screwdrivers. Additionally, the space between the blades of the X is much narrower. This is because JIS screwdrivers have sharp angles between the blades rather than a flat curve that you see on Phillips screwdrivers. What this means is a JIS screwdriver won't slip and damage a screw head the way a Phillips will. On climate-controlled, low-torque fasteners, you may find a Phillips screwdriver works just fine. But for areas like your engine bay that are constantly being heat cycled, Phillips screwdrivers will slip out of screws at high torque applications and damage the head. For those of you who have ever had to remove an IAC valve from a Toyota throttle body, you'll find a JIS screwdriver is worth its weight in gold. One of the weird quirks of the Japanese not being able to license Henry Phillips' self-centering screw design in the early 1900s was, now we have JIS screwdrivers that will index perfectly with the Phillips screw, but a Phillips screwdriver will not index with the JIS screw. It's not always easy to find a high-quality JIS screwdriver in North America. While some hardware stores carry them, more than likely you're going to have to jump on Amazon or online to get it. The screwdrivers you'll see me use in all these videos are from Vessel. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but they are a fantastic product and very reasonably priced. I'll leave a link to where you can get one in the description. Now with those 4 fasteners removed, you can pull the radio straight out. And it looks like at some point someone replaced this with another Toyota stock radio and paid $90 for it. I'm not sure when that was exactly, unless this is a date down here. It's July 18th, 2012. But what we're going to do is add one of these. It's a Bluetooth module that will connect to the optional CD changer port on the back of most Toyota stock radios. Unfortunately, the camera light washed out the label, but I will leave a link to where this can be had in the video description. Along with the Bluetooth adapter, you'll find a few other cables in here. There's an aux cord, a microphone, a USB-A adapter, so if you want to have additional connectivity in your car, you can do that. Myself, I pretty much just use Bluetooth, and I will usually go ahead and set up the aux cord, but I've done this in just about every car I've owned, and I've yet to use the aux cord, but that's not going to stop me today. We're going to start with our serial connector and plug that into the adapter. On the other end, you'll find the connector that's going to plug into the back of the radio. And now I'm going to grab that aux cord and plug it into the adapter and then feed the other end down so that it falls into the lower footwell on the passenger side. Now before we get any further, I'm going to go ahead and put the car back in park. And I'm going to grab my phone and my key, and we're going to power up this radio and see if we can't test this before we start putting everything back together. So if you turn your key to the accessory position, that should provide power to your radio. And from there, we're just going to pull up our phone and search for the Bluetooth adapter. Now, because this is plugged into your CD changer, whenever you use it, you're going to need to be on the CD setting on your radio. And there's our adapter, so we're going to go ahead and connect to it. And I ejected a CD in here. Tam, if you're watching this, it's something in Vietnamese. If you'd like it back, I will bring it down next time I'm in Houston. Okay, so let's try this out. I've moved to the CD setting on the radio, and we're going to need to find a song and probably turn up the volume. And success. Now for copyright reasons, I'm not playing any of the music that's coming through Spotify, but it does seem to be working pretty well. Now it's been different in the different cars depending on what radio is installed in there, but you can use the buttons on the radio itself to control Spotify or whatever music app that you're running. On here it's the track up and track down button to change the songs, but I think in my IS300 it's the skip forward, skip back, which would be 1 and 2 on the channels, but here I'm just running through them, and I'm actually a little disappointed because usually Spotify for me is a little hit or miss on the songs that they play, but every song that came up on here I thought was really good, so I skipped them for the sake of the video, but if I had been alone in the car, I would have listened to all these songs. So now that we're confident it's all working, we can start putting this all back together. I'm going to start by making some space and moving this shifter back as far as I can. Usually I have to get very creative about how I mount this module behind the console, but on the 4Runner there is a spot right under the stock amp that looks like it's built just for this. There's a little padding and insulation there, and it sandwiches in very snug. And from here, everything is just going to be in reverse order from when we took it apart. So we're going to start with the 4 fasteners that are holding the radio. And now we're going to retrieve our bezel, and we'll start from the bottom. We've got the 2 plugs for the cigarette lighters and power adapter here. On my harness they will be blue. There will be 1 light for the ashtray, and this just pushes forward and snaps into place. You will have an additional light for the cigarette lighter, and that's going to slide in and then turn 1/4 turn counterclockwise. And another power plug for the cigarette lighter. And now we've got our 4 connectors up top. Now each of these will only fit in its correct slot. So we've got the orange and the white connectors for the ETC control and the rear window switch. and one plug for the hazard light switch, and one for the clock. And both of those will be black, but they again only fit into the connectors that they correspond to. Now I am having some struggles getting the vents lined up here, but it's primarily because I can't see back there. The camera is mounted above me and I'm trying to avoid sticking my head in between the camera and the shot. But once we get it in place, a little firm pressure around the outside and you'll feel those clips start to snap back into their corresponding holes. And from here we can move our shifter back into a more upright position, and that will give us the space we need for our shifter bezel to go 90 degrees down and around. And there are just 4 clips. This time we're going to get the 2 in front seated first, and then from there the 2 in the back. Because this switch panel is mounted on the shifter bezel itself, I do have some trouble getting this in here. I think ultimately what I want to do is try and retain the factory look, so I will take this out and mount it inside the overhead compartment by the dome light usually used for your garage door opener. But for now I'm going to tuck the wire for the switch panel underneath here. And then we can move our shifter forward and replace the cover on the shift lock. This only fits one way, so it's going to be difficult to get it wrong. If it doesn't feel right at first, don't force it in, just make sure that it's aligned correctly. And now that it's all together, we're going to give it one more test just to make sure that nothing came loose and everything is still working. So let's fire up Spotify one more time. And another great song. And that's it. The radio is defeated. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around. If this video helped you out, give it a like and consider subscribing. If you have your own tips and tricks, leave them in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time in the garage.